Welcome, Senator. How are you today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely.
So I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 548, removing gray squirrels from the definition of game animals. If this feels like deja vu, we were here 2 years ago on a similar bill. The House, when I was the chair of the House Fish and Game Committee last term, we had a bill that ultimately came to the Senate to do the similar thing. But now that I'm over in the Senate, I realize the wisdom of the Senate. It had killed the bill because we had amended the wrong chapter. We would have created a conflict in law with the chapter that we amended in the House with this chapter, because this is the reason why gray squirrels are managed, is this specific chapter of law in 2071. And so I corrected it, and we bring the bill forward again to strike gray squirrels. And so the question is, why are we bringing this bill forward, and what's the cause? So again, when I was chair last term of the House Fish and Game Committee, in the bill we had for gray squirrels, in the testimony we heard, no one could tell us why gray squirrels are on our managed species list. Why are we managing gray squirrels? I understand why we manage deer, bear, elk. They're generally one-season breeders, so they have one season a year when they have their litters. Their litters are small, one, two animals, bear, deer, moose, those kind of things. But gray squirrels have 2 litters a year, and they average about eight babies per litter. So every year they produce between 16 and 20 new squirrels. That goes on. But nobody explained to me that they were at risk for any kind of getting on the endangered species list or anything like that. There was no, due to their prolific breeding, they self-manage their own population. And so to me, this became a little bit of the role of government bill, rather than talking about the animals. Fish and Game's responsibility is to make sure animal resources are available for all New Hampshire citizens to be here going forward. And we manage only the species and interfere with hunters only to the level that we have to manage the species for procreation and to make sure that they're available for future citizens. We don't need to do that with squirrels. We don't need to manage the population of squirrels. I think we all remember 2018, where between exit 20 and Concord, I passed over 100 dead squirrels on the road, and yet we have no problem with a squirrel population today. Right? The animals quickly recovered. There's no issue with the population. We don't need to manage them. So the point again is this is a role of government, a role of function. Is it a function of Fish and Game to manage a species that doesn't need management? Why are we stepping into hunters and excluding them from their right to hunt this or to hunt this animal when there's no scientific basis to why we're managing the animals? It's as simple as that.
Thank you for your testimony, Senator. You said they self-manage. Where do we get that data?
I'm sorry?
You said they self-manage themselves?
Well, all I'm saying is by 2018, we had that squirrel apocalypse, and now the squirrels are proliferated everywhere. So they manage themselves.
I actually counted 300 that from here to Nashua. Apparently, they got drunk on acorns or something.
Could be. The one other thing I do want to mention is again in that committee when I was chair of Fish and Game, one of the things that the Fish and Game came in and said was that they expect less than 5% of the hunting population will hunt gray squirrels. That's the typical range for other states and things that have regulations. It's less than 5%. So we're not talking about every hunter running out into the woods all year long hunting squirrels. It's a very small population that would possibly do this.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, colleague. Do you hunt squirrels?
No, I do not.
I guess that this would be a hypothetical. I mean, I used to a long time ago, but we ate them. And, you know, so I guess my question is, what is the purpose of hunting them if you're not going to consume them?
Sure, there's 2 reasons. So again, you could consume them, or nothing. There's squirrel cookbooks out there that explain how you can possibly prepare the meat and make stews and all kinds of things with it. So there will be people, and there are people that do consume squirrel. I won't say it's a common, but it's also not uncommon in hunting community for people to do that. But the other reason is that, again, in chatting with Fish and Game, sometimes this is a training animal, right? This is what hunters use to train their children on how to hunt. It teaches them target acquisition, how to proper sight alignment, all of the things that are necessary to be a good hunter, knowing your backstop. So hunting a squirrel like that for children is it's kind of like when you take a kid deep sea fishing, right? You go fishing, and if you don't catch any fish, the kid never wants to go back out again, right? And so if you can train, when you go and train with a new hunter, you can go out in the woods and you can find a gray squirrel. And so you can teach them and teach them target acquisition, teach them how to watch their sight alignment and to look what their backstop is before they pull the trigger, and all of those things you're able to train. So there's several reasons why you might want to hunt them.
I may follow up. You know, I mean, you describe my youth in a way, but can you understand that at some point one wonders, is that this living animal is just target practice, and are we also teaching killing for the sake of killing or wanton waste of animals?
I don't think any hunter would agree with that statement.
Well, I was one, and I guess another question, if you don't mind. I'm
feel
kind
free.
of a philosophical guy. You know, my faith tradition declared that all the creatures were good. I mean, that's what the Creator said when you know, the world was created, and then people were given the use and the usufruct and the idea of stewardship, and very clear in my faith tradition, Old Testament, that this was not meant for wanton killing, but for the use of, and meaning the consumption, and that's true throughout the tradition. So I guess I'm trying to ask is that how is the killing for the sake of killing something that accords with what we want to be teaching our children?
Thank you for the question. Again, any hunter would never classify it killing, would just not go out and shoot an animal for the sake of shooting an animal. So I disagree with your premise of the question. And for me, I don't use religion as a basis for my public policy, for myself. Again, I would tell you that hunters who hunt don't kill just for the sake of killing.
So this is an equivalent to the railroads where they were just shooting at the buffaloes as they were just shooting them to kill them.
Well, I understand that statement. But again, the thing I'm going to remind you is that gray squirrels are considered nuisance animals. They're actually rodents. They're in the same family as mice and rats and porcupines. And we don't have any game limits. We don't have any limit on that. You can shoot those whenever you want. This is an animal we regulate for no legitimate state purpose.
Senator Altshuler with a question?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for your testimony. If I heard you correctly in your testimony, you said that one of the reasons we should remove gray squirrel is that it's useful to teach children, young hunters, entry-level hunters, how to hunt. Is that right?
That was information I was given, yes.
Oh, so that's not your experience?
Excuse me?
That's not your experience that you were talking about?
No, I
Okay.
used a different technique for my children to teach them how to shoot.
Thank you. May I follow up?
Follow.
So in looking at our statute as it reads, we have moose, bear, caribou, elk, and of those four at the very beginning of the statute, 3 of them move really, really slowly and are much, much larger targets. And it would seem that if you're trying to, as you said, create an experience that is a positive one so that someone will want to, go back and try it again. So what you're essentially describing is giving someone a win on the front end of a new hobby. Why not remove moose, bear, and elk, because they're bigger, slower, and you'd definitely be able to hit one.
Sure.
Rather than the squirrels.
Sure. Thank you again for the question. And again, I'm going to refer back to the beginning of my testimony, right? The purpose of Fish and Game, right? This is the role of government argument, right? The purpose of Fish and Game is to protect the animal resources for future citizens of New Hampshire, right? That's one of the primary responsibilities of Fish and Game. And in the case of moose, bear, caribou, elk, deer, they all have to be managed because unrestricted hunting would decimate the population for future citizens. And because they're not prolific breeders. So the difference is the fact that they only have one season that they bear reproduction. They bear children, or whatever phrase you want to use. They only bear one litter a year, whereas squirrels have two, and squirrels have not just one deer or two deer per litter. They have 8 to 10. So again, prolific breeders,
Like rabbits.
similar to rabbits. Yes.
I follow up. So, I guess with that argument, it's, is this legislation, by removing the gray squirrel based on its breeding capacity, seems that this would be a first step in then subsequently removing hare and wild rabbit, because they also have proliferate breeding capacity. So
I go-
is there, and I think, I wonder if you might rethink the purpose of Fish and Game for preserving animal population who are genuinely our neighbors in this state, not for the purposes of our enjoyment, killing, or sustenance, but because they also live here. And they were here first too. So they don't serve us, nor do we serve them, but maybe we should be living in accordance. So, but getting back to the wild rabbit and hare, is this not the entryway for doing that? Is that the intention?
Thank you. By no stretch is that my intention. Again, I'm going to go back to my testimony earlier where I said that I was the chair of Fish and Game last year in the House, and we heard testimony from Fish and Game. They could provide, and the issue in front of us at that time was gray squirrels. And when I asked them, why do we manage gray squirrels? We have no scientific evidence as to why. They couldn't produce me one study, one report, why we manage this animal and not any of the other multitude of animals we have in the state. And so again, if I go back to the discussion of role of government, right, should citizens be able to do something without state interference unless the state has a legitimate reason to do something? And in my opinion, based on the testimony last term, there was no legitimate scientific reason for managing the population for the future citizens of New Hampshire.
I have a question. My next door neighbor had a squirrel problem. They got into his attic and they really, they made a heck out of his, and it cost him thousands of dollars to fix what the squirrels did. Without this bill, if he'd have killed those squirrels, would he be in violation of the law?
So no, it would not actually been, because again, you can, if they're damaging your property, you're allowed to shoot them already year round. But I'd also say that depending on where that was, you have a different statute you have to deal with, which is the firing of a firearm within a municipality or a compact. So I'm not going to speak to that other than to make the statement that it may still have been illegal, but for a different reason. But no, you can currently, they are nuisance animals. But the difference is that it puts the burden on you as the homeowner to prove the damage to Fish and Game if someone makes a complaint. Whereas if we didn't have this law, you wouldn't have to prove anything and Fish and Game wouldn't get involved at all.
Yeah, all the bullet holes in the roof were absolutely. I am kidding. I'm kidding. For the record, I'm kidding. No, he had a real big.
And by no stretch do I think this is a huge, like Fish and Game is spending an enormous amount of time managing gray squirrel population. Again, it comes back to why are we managing? And if we don't have a legitimate reason to manage, then why is it in our list?
And this doesn't affect the red squirrel.
Well, and again, to your point, red squirrels, there's a year-round season on. Right, so chipmunks, there's year-round season on, right? So again, these are animals we don't manage because they don't need to be managed.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. With regards to the other list of animals on here, the hare, the wild rabbit, are they considered, does Fish and Game consider them nuisance animals versus the gray squirrels?
To my knowledge, no.
Thank you.
Further questions? Yeah, Senator Alshuler?
Yes, a two-part question. You mentioned Fish and Game had a lot of opinions in the House when you served, in the House. Did they ask for this bill?
No.
And they did not, okay. And did they testify that outside of their mission to conserve, manage, and protect the resources of fish, wildlife, and marine resources and their habitats, did they testify that we have a proliferate gray squirrel problem in New Hampshire?
I'm not quite, I understand your question, but I'm going to guess the answer is no. They didn't come out and say we have to open the season up, if that's your question. They didn't ask for the bill.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Senator.
Chair, I'd love to stick around, but I got to run off to education.
That's fine. That's, all right, so Linda Diane, you're opposed to this, but you didn't just say whether you want to speak or not. Oh, Beth, you're going to speak? No, Beth doesn't want to speak for you. Okay. We're just going to make a little check mark right there. There we go. All right, and so let's go with Weldon. Bosworth, in opposition.
I'm Weldon Bosworth, I'm from Guilford, I'm also with the New Hampshire Wildlife.
Microphone, please. Yeah, yep. Hit the button.
Okay, again, my name's Weldon Bosworth, I'm from Guilford, New Hampshire, and I'm also with the New Hampshire Wildlife Coalition, and I oppose this bill.
I need copies, Phil.
I think this bill, in my opinion, is one of the most regressive and ill-thought-out bills I've seen on wildlife for quite some time. And I'm a PhD ecologist, so I would like to basically, I'm not going to critique what Senator Lang said, but squirrels are very important to the environment. First of all, you wouldn't have forests spread all around if you didn't have squirrels to spread the seeds. They're responsible, their foraging habits are responsible for the distribution of plants. And probably most important, they serve as prey to some of our iconic predators, fur bearers. Things like foxes, fish, or coyotes. So we wouldn't have those if we didn't have prey like that. A lot of people consider squirrels a nuisance animal. Usually the squirrels that get into people's houses are the red squirrels, not so much the grays. So I guess in deference to the fact that they are hunted, Fish and Game in this state has basically closed their reproductive season so there can be more of them. They actually survive quite well with a mast crop. When you have a lot of acorns, you have a lot of squirrels, and then you have the reflex of a lot of predators, okay? So, you know, after 2018, there was a boom, but shortly after it kind of got back so people weren't noticing it anymore. All states on the eastern seaboard recognize that the squirrel season is, there is a time during which the squirrel season should be closed during the reproductive time in order to bolster the, let's say, the supply of prey to the other species that we value so much. We talked about nuisance a little bit. Anybody that's got a problem with a squirrel, there's a process they can go through, which, with Fish and Game's authorization, that they can take care of them, whether they're damaging, agricultural property or their homes and things like that. So I think somebody hit it on here. The only real purpose I can see here is for anybody introducing this bill is that those people that sort of get their jollies killing wild live animals instead of going to the target range will have something to do all summer while the squirrels are reproducing. I call that's sort of morally reprehensible to me, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator Alshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Weldon, for your testimony. I do have your testimony in front of me, and my question is, you had in your testimony that you submitted to the committee, you state that there are no states along the eastern seaboard that allow gray squirrel hunting all year round. While hunting seasons vary in length and timing, all states have designated periods when hunting is prohibited. Are there any states in the western part of the country? Do you know of any states I mean, there aren't any in the east, but are there any states where you can shoot gray squirrels all year without?
I didn't really look into that, Senator, and
Okay.
in fact, gray squirrels have a range that's a little bit different. There's other squirrels, other
Yeah.
species of squirrels, black squirrels and things like that, so I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Dan Bergeron. Oh, yeah. Duh. Right up here.
Good morning, Chairman Avard and members of the committee. So my name is Dan Bergeron. I'm the Chief of the Wildlife Division with New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. I'm here to testify in opposition of SB 548 FN. So I guess I'll address a few things. So certainly all the states, at least in the Northeast, all the New England states, New York as well, all have a season for gray squirrel. There's slight variation between those hunting seasons, but they're fairly consistent with one another. I think I'll be up here at least a few times today, and I think what will be a common theme of my testimony is that typically, if there's legislation that looks to remove Fish and Game's rulemaking authority, we tend to be opposed to that. We like to be able to retain our authority to change season lengths, timing, method and manner of take, and rule. This allows us to manage species a little bit more effective and efficiently. It's a quicker process. If there are large changes in any number of things, hunting pressure, effort, natural food availability, weather events. It is true that gray squirrel populations are largely regulated through availability of natural food, so mast crops, things like acorns, beech nuts. That was the result of that large die-off that we saw in 2018. There was a lack of natural food. Squirrel had to travel further to find it, and they were struck by vehicles at a much higher rate. Following that, we did see a decline in the squirrel population. We tracked that through hunter observation rates from a small game hunter survey that we do. But again, the squirrel population did rebound after a few years following that event. We prefer to keep a season on gray squirrels because they are a species that is somewhat commonly harvested. Things like porcupine, red squirrels, chipmunks, things that hunters don't eat. There's obviously not much in the way to eat on a chipmunk or a red squirrel. Hunters do routinely eat gray squirrels, hunters who harvest them. And hunting pressure is at a level where it's high enough that we're concerned that if it's not regulated in some degree, maybe not on an annual basis, but certainly in the face of some of these natural food events where there's a food failure, if nothing else, it could certainly slow the recovery of the squirrel population, may impact hunting seasons in the years to come. As Mr. Bosworth had pointed out, squirrels are an important prey base for other things. I guess another point that I'll address is personally, myself, and I think the department in whole, I don't like to refer to animals as nuisance species. Any animal has the potential to have human-wildlife conflict situations. That's true with bear, deer, moose. The department has a number of ways to deal with those situations. For example, there is a state law that allows anyone to take an animal that is in the act of causing damage. So at any time of year, if any animal, this isn't specific to gray squirrels, if that animal's causing damage, a landowner or homeowner is allowed to take that animal. With gray squirrels, typically what happens is someone would hire a wildlife control operator, those individuals are also regulated under our administrative rules. And they can come in and trap the animals. For agricultural damage, the department has in our FIS 304 section, we actually have a wildlife damage program where typically it's for agricultural growers, but if they're experiencing damage by any wildlife species, there's a method there to allow additional permits for take. The grower or the agricultural person can always take those animals themselves, but sometimes it's difficult. You know, you're busy farming, you're busy doing whatever it may be. You might not have time to also protect your crops. So we have permits that we can issue that can be given out to anyone that they choose to do that take for them. And there's no exception. Gray squirrels would fall under that as well. So, you know, we feel as though we have methods to deal with some of these conflict issues. And the benefit there is that those things tend to be more focused. So you're addressing those efforts specifically where the problem exists, as opposed to over the state where, you know, if there's unlimited harvest, you could see certain areas where there's, you know, extended pressure, but there may not be a problem to begin with. So usually when there's conflict situations, we like to try and focus those where the conflict exists. So for those reasons, the department is opposed to this bill. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator Waters with the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was thinking as you were talking that maybe the only real nuisance species is human beings, but that's our job to regulate humans up here. So we'll leave that. You don't have to worry about it.
You are very familiar with that, I'm sure.
Fish and game. But I guess my question is, what it seems to me you're describing is the usefulness of management practices for fish and game on this species. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and again, I think that's true for really all species. You know, we like to keep all the tools in the toolbox. Again, this species does largely regulate through food availability. You know, I'm not gonna make the claim that hunting pressure is what's regulating the squirrel population, but again, you know, if events line up and there is unlimited harvest, there's potential to have negative impacts, and you know, it may be as simple as, you know, slower population recovery.
Just to follow up. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And would it also be kind of fair to say that we're entering an unprecedented era of uncertainty over species of all? I mean, we've seen the bird population decline 50, 60, 70% in the last few years, and that it probably is best in this time of uncertainty to let the Fish and Game Department have the tools that it might need for potentially unprecedented changes in animal populations.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. You know, we're seeing that. We've been seeing that for quite some time. I think everyone's probably familiar with the issues that we see with moose in the state. You know, the shortened winters. I mean, this was a perfect example. We were snow-free into January in, you know, large portions of the state. That has, you know, allowed the proliferation of certain pests, winter tick, for example, with moose. You know, there's concerns about range shifts of different plant species, tree species. You know, again, these changes in weather, we're not sure how that's going to impact mass production. So acorn production, beech production. There's other diseases that are out there, particularly with beech trees, which is an important food source for wildlife. So there certainly are some uncertainties out there, and we're not sure how in the future that may impact wildlife species.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further questions, Senator Bertzel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. When you say if they're being a nuisance, let's say either with the farming or in the house, if they're doing damage, how typically does, when someone comes in to get rid of the nuisance animal, how do they typically get rid of them?
So it would depend on the situation. So typically, if it's in a home, they would be trapped. You know, if they're in your attic, they're chewing on wires. You would probably hire a wildlife control operator to come in, and it would lethally trap them out of your home. If it's a situation where it's agricultural, it would probably likely be someone would be shooting the animals, you know, in the act of causing damage. That's another thing with in our 304 section of our rules. You know, we have restrictions as to, you know, where the animals can be shot. You know, you can't go a mile away on the you know, assuming someone has a property that big, but you have to be in the area where the damage is occurring. They don't have to be in the act with these permits, but if they're in the area of the crop and damage has been documented from that specific species, we can allow additional harvest there to make sure that, you know, they're able to protect their crop. So if it's an agricultural situation, it would probably be shooting. If it's in a home, it would be probably lethally trapping and removing the animals.
Follow-up?
Thank you. When you say lethal trapping, I guess my biggest concern, and especially when we're dealing with nuisance animals in the house like mice and other animals, a lot of companies come in and do poison, which then affects our raptors, which I'm really concerned about. What do they do to lethally kill the squirrels?
So, in my experience, and I can't speak for everyone, certainly those pesticides are available and are used, and the department has concerns about that as well. In my experience, out of college, I actually did work for a wildlife control company, and all the work that we did was with traps. So they were essentially, large. I mean, in terms of the way they operated, they looked very differently, but in terms of the way they operated, they were very similar to like a rat trap, where it was, a quick killing trap. The company I worked for did not use any pesticides or rodenticides, but that's not to say that there aren't companies that potentially do that.
Good morning. Thanks for coming in today.
Absolutely.
So just for the benefit of the committee, what is the current season for the gray squirrel prohibition on hunting?
I have to double check. It's September 1st through, we just changed it. I believe it goes through the end of January now. A few years ago, it used to go through December, and recently, in rule, we extended it through the end of January, I believe. I'd have to double check that, though, the end date.
So we have, during that, I guess I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this question. What is the difference between, I still don't understand the difference between a red squirrel and a gray squirrel in the sense of why we manage one and we don't manage another. I mean, you do the small game surveys, you talked about that in squirrel sightings. Is there a distinction in the survey of the species of squirrel that they're seeing, or is it just reported as a squirrel?
So there is a distinction. We don't ask for reporting on red squirrels because so they're really not a heavily hunted species, red squirrels. There's very little pressure on them. Again, their range is a bit different. They're very small size. So most individuals don't harvest them. And, it's a fair question. There certainly is a difference, but I think the difference is that there is a lack of interest in hunting red squirrels, largely due to their size and the fact that, you have to get several gray squirrels even to make a meal. It would be even more so for red squirrels. And due to the lack of interest, and again, that's the same for other species like skunks, possums, those species where there's a real lack of interest. Gray squirrels has historically been a very popular game species. Obviously not as much as deer and bear and moose and things like that, but I would say gray squirrels are a species where the hunting pressure is kind of on the limit of where we would like to retain some management authority. In the event that there's some of these unforeseen events that might take place.
Well, one more. So you talked about depredation permits in the agricultural world. As you know, that's an area where I work, and I guess I don't know that I've ever seen anybody get a depredation permit on a gray squirrel. Have you issued any?
We've never had a request for one that I'm aware of.
That's kind of my thought.
Yeah, I don't believe we've ever had a request for a depredation permit for squirrels. Deer is the most common one that we issue for. That is, by and large, the most common species we issue those permits for. But, we have issued them for turkey, we've issued them for bear. So we do issue them for other species, but the requests are much less common.
I think that really leads to my question is that I realize that Fish and Game manages these and it manages the species and would like to retain that authority, but I guess I, again, question the need for the management and the resources going into managing this. It doesn't sound like you have a lot of issues with gray squirrel management I guess that's kind of my question. Is there a lot of resources from the department going into gray squirrel management?
No, there really isn't. There's not a lot of resources. Again, the data we collect is through our small game survey, and we collect information on a number of other small game species throughout that survey. So, adding gray squirrels to that does not really add any additional cost. So there's really not a lot of additional resources that are focused on squirrels, and that tends to be true for species that where hunting pressure is lower and that do have healthy populations. We're an agency of limited staffing and resources, so we divert our resources, to the things that deer, for example. Deer is certainly a species that without a regulated hunting season, hunters could have an impact on because there's so much interest in that species. Other species that might have lower reproductive potential, same thing. So more effort tends to go into those species.
So the issue really is rulemaking authority as far as us kind of messing up with that. Is there any way you can keep those little red squirrels quiet while you're hunting?
I have not found a way.
Hey guys, they're here!
Yeah. It's like a car alarm going off.
Exactly. It can be a pain in the neck. Senator Altshuler, did you have a question? Okay. Senator Russo.
Just one final question. We heard in the testimony from the prime sponsor that it would allow, extending the hunting season for gray squirrels would allow training for anyone who's learning to hunt. Would you say the September through January, you've actually extended the hunting season for squirrels out to January. Would that not be plenty of time to train a youngster?
Yeah, so, I can speak to that, certainly. So yes, gray squirrel is a common species that people will introduce youth to hunting. I believe Senator Altshuler had mentioned, larger, slower moving animals. Squirrels are, they're abundant, they're easy to find. You can get relatively close to them, versus other species that are much more kind of, they're much more aware of their surroundings. They'll flee more readily. So although they're larger and can evade you, or larger and, so I might argue about the slower aspect. They can be quite quick, but they're very hard to hunt, those larger species. So it is a common species. I would say that we've never heard from the hunting community that, the current season is not long enough to introduce someone to hunting. Typically, there's only so much time in the year. Some of our seasons overlap, so a lot of times someone might introduce a youth to hunting through the squirrel season up to the start date of the deer season, and then focus shifts over. So there's some of that goes on. It's not to say that if you had an extended period of time, it might not allow more opportunity, but I haven't seen anything with the comments we've received through rulemaking or emails that we get that anyone is concerned about needing more time to introduce youth through a longer squirrel season.
I would just add that my dog has trouble catching them, so they are pretty fast.
They're very fast, yes.
Has your dog caught one?
No, she pulls me on leash.
No further questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Christina, would you like to speak? Christina Snyder said opposed and wishes to speak. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, I'm Christina Snyder, and I am on Team Squirrel, so I am opposed to this bill in a very strong fashion. I'm very opposed to this bill. I feel a little bit responsible for this bill because 2 years ago I was one of the main reasons why the original squirrel bill to actually shorten the season came about. And then as Senator Lang testified, it got reversed, and then that happened, and now here we are. So I feel a level of responsibility for this, which makes me sad. But to get to a couple of points is, I don't really know who's asking for this bill other than the sponsors of this bill. The animal rights, animal welfare advocates, and even the sportsmen are all opposed to this bill. As a matter of fact, the National Sportsmen's Alliance, which is one of the largest sportsmen and sportswomen's lobbying group, put out an email blast yesterday asking their members to oppose this bill. You know, if this bill passes, it really has a potential to open the door for incredible amounts of what I see harm. I sent in testimony, and I'll just reference that in Missouri, there was a case where 16 hunters went out, and those 16 killed 471 squirrels, gray squirrels. And they did nothing with these gray squirrels. They just piled them up until the carcasses started rotting. And the Missouri Department of Wildlife cited them because they have laws down there, because they were over possession limit and they went over their take. Now, if this bill passes, something like that would be perfectly legal, perfectly fine, nothing to see here. And that to me is just unacceptable. And believe me, there is a high potential for that, to happen, because there are a section of the populace that does like to target shoot and take it out and possibly do this to these gray squirrels. It would be wanton killing. It would be wanton waste. You know, these could be squirrels filled with lead just tossed into the environment. That's not acceptable because that could affect the raptors further up. And as much as there are people that do want to kill these squirrels and use them for target practice, I want to bring it to your mind that there is a large percentage of the population that likes squirrels, that cares about these animals. And the fact that they could be hunted and killed while they have dependent young, as the young starve and get fly maggots on them as they die a slow death in their nest. I mean, come on, where's the compassion? And as a matter of fact, Millstone Wildlife Center, which is in Derry, they get orphan squirrels all year long, and the amount of feedback and the amount of support, thousands of people support them. They like their posts, they comment, and people bring them these orphan baby squirrels that they find. People care. Opening up something like this, when no other state surrounding us even thinks about doing something like this, to me it's just unacceptable, and I think it would be a very bad look for New Hampshire. As Mr. Bergeron stated, there are nuisance predation or depredation permits, which haven't been issued, but they're available if you do have problems with squirrels. So that's really all I have to say. So please oppose this bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Seeing none, well done.
Thank you.
Joan O'Brien, ask for 1 minute. I'm going to check that off. There you go. All right. And I think our last speaker is Katie Nolan. Requesting a half hour. I'm just kidding.
Take the rest of your morning. I'll try to be brief. A lot of my points have been said already as well. And apologies, I'm getting over a bit of a cold. Good morning. My name is Katie Nolan. I'm the Wild Animals Campaign Specialist at In Defense of Animals, a national animal protection nonprofit. I'm also a resident of Sullivan County, New Hampshire. Removing squirrels from the definition of game animal will eliminate the closed season and bag limits of this species, which could have unintended consequences on squirrel populations and New Hampshire ecosystems as a whole. Squirrels play a crucial role in maintaining ecological balance. As you heard, they're integral to seed dispersal, they promote forest regeneration, and aid in the diversification of plant species. They also help to control insect populations, and as we know, they're prey for other species. In conclusion, I urge you to oppose this bill because removing squirrels from the definition of game animal is misguided, and I don't believe this bill is based in science. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Well done. Questions from the committee? Senator Alschuler with a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I don't have a
Run
question.
off.
You cannot leave now. You sit down.
I just want to comment that this is some of the most lovely looking testimony we've ever received. I love this.
Oh,
It's just
Very good.
beautiful. Thank you.
Did you do this?
I did not. That is not mine.
Oh,
But
you did this, all right.
I am glad that someone included photos.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Yeah, of course.
I think that's it for the gray squirrel. Uh, Okay, you got 1 minute.
Thank you, Senator. Kurt Ehrenberg, the Humane Society of the United States, and just very briefly, I wanted to say that we do oppose this bill for many of the reasons already stated, and I would point out, besides the sponsor, there's been no testimony in favor of this bill. So,
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank
Questions
you.
from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Now we're going to close the hearing.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Question for, I guess maybe for Philip and for you. Can we get a list of how many people have signed in?
Sure.
Not just here, but online? Is there, like, where do you have that?
You can actually look at the list too if you want.
I've got, well, yeah, thank you. This is going to be in the hearing report. Yeah, this is,
Yeah.
okay. I'm wondering if we might know what those numbers are when we have our hearings, or, you know.
Usually when the hearing report comes up at the very
It's got-
top, I think it says.
Okay.
Yeah.
And any of the, I'm sorry, here you go. Any of the online testimony that's submitted through the website, not necessarily to an email to us? Oh, that's right. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate that.
Okay, so next we have SB 346, and we're going to hear from the prime sponsor. Senator Waters, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 346, prohibiting the use of dogs while hunting coyotes. And you'll see it's a very simple bill that amends RSA 208 by inserting that section it's prohibited to use dogs to hunt coyotes. Let me preface my discussion of the need for this bill by noting what our current rules are on hunting of coyotes. So you go to 303.06 and it says coyote may be taken by the use of firearm, crossbow, or bow, an arrow year-round, half hour before sunrise and 1/2 hour after sunset. And there is a season for night hunting from January 1st to March 31st. So you can hunt them anytime you want, any way you want, trap them. And you can do it at night in those dates. So this bill is not really about limiting the hunting of coyotes at all. I mean, you want to kill them, you can kill them. You want to trap them, you can trap them. It's about dogs. And it is exceedingly rare in this state that dogs are used to track coyotes, but there are examples of it. And I think that it is an issue that we ought to attend to primarily on the basis of animal dog welfare. That, you know, dogs are used in hunting, yes, but what's different about coyote is that coyotes can't be treed. So it's not like a bear where the bear is treed. It is a chase to the point of exhaustion and then ending with essentially a dogfight. I mean, coyotes are canids too, right? They're same genus there, their species. And so it really is about the dogs. That what this practice does is it sets dogs to chase coyotes until exhaustion. They may be equipped with GPS in their collar, which, you know, if you want to think about what kind of fair hunt this really is, but that's certainly another issue. But the dogs will chase until the coyote is at exhaustion because it can't be treed, and then the dogs may attack the coyote. So you have a dog fight, and you know what dogs do when they fight, they rip out the throats and so on. So, you know, again, we can kill coyotes any which way we want in this state all the time, basically, and at night in the season. But the use of dogs here, I think, is the real issue of what does it mean for potential inhumane, you know, cruelty towards dogs. Now, I know that people who hunt with dogs love their dogs, care about their dogs, but we have a real tradition here of looking to those practices that may endanger dogs and put them in situations, here essentially a dog fight to the death. And so I think it's quite reasonable for, say, in this regard, this one very small thing, that the dog protection outweighs the ability for hunting in rare circumstances with the use of dogs. If you can't use your dogs, you can trap them, you can shoot them with a crossbow, you can shoot them with a rifle all year round and at night in 3 months of the year. This is about the dogs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony, Senator. And are dogs allowed at this current time?
Yes,
They are. Oh,
yes, yes.
Senator Britzel?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I've never heard of coyote hunting, using dogs for coyote hunting, but don't coyotes typically run in a pack? And wouldn't this impact the domestic canines?
Well, that is a possibility. I do think that, the way dogs are trained, and then a panicked animal will run and scatter and run to try to protect itself, and then the dogs will select one trail to follow, and they'll go after. But, in any circumstances, I really worry about the dogs when they enter a situation where essentially you're having a dog fight, because these are canids too. They can't escape. Maybe rarely they could outrun. I'm sure they certainly cannot, but they cannot be treed. This is what we do with bears. They get treed, the hunter comes, shoots the bear. With the coyote, I'm sure dog owners will here to try to train the dogs not to attack and kill, but that happens, and there is evidence of it. I'm not going to pass around photos, Again, this is not about the coyotes themselves. It's about dogs and what we're permitting under law.
I think my vision might be a little bit clouded on this because my in-laws' neighbors, their dog got eaten by a coyote. So, yikes. And their dog gets tied up. So I don't think they run in packs necessarily, but they can be kind of cruel. Thank you for your testimony. I have further questions from the committee. Seeing none. Thank you very much. All right. Not wishing to speak, Commissioner. Okay. Weldon, would you like to speak again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Weldon Bosworth from Guilford, and I support this bill. There's a number of ways of killing coyotes. I think, as Senator Waters pointed out, they can be killed all year round, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the most gruesome ways is by hounding, and he's described some of the things that might happen. At the last commission meeting, when this bill was brought up to evaluate whether or not the commission should support this, they said, well, we got to basically oppose this bill because it's tradition to hunt coyotes with dogs. What is tradition? When dogs were first domesticated, yes, people walking on foot used dogs as companions to help them hunt, run down game and so forth. These people actually, they walked through the woods, they were wood savvy, they were in great shape. So it was sort of what we call fair chase. The game had a somewhat equal chance of escaping. That's not the situation now. The situation now is that the dogs have collars on them with the GPS, so the hunters know where the dogs are. Generally, a lot of them follow them in vehicles and so forth. So I think at this point it's not even subsistence hunting, it's not fair chase, and I think for that reason this bill should pass. I wanted to point out there's a number of traditions that humans have had that basically is that it's entertainment for them but cruelty for the animals, and I think we know, I put a list there, dog fighting, cock fighting. Maybe you don't remember bear baiting, where bears were chained to a stake and dogs attacked them and went after them and multiple dogs. So I'm saying tradition is not a good reason for keeping this practice going. We already got enough ways to kill coyotes. In fact, the commission, I think the Fish and Game Commission probably errs more on the side of tradition and getting rid of these varmints than it does on science. So I support this bill, and I thank you for your time.
Senator, would you care for a question? I would. Yes.
Thank you for coming in today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you ever witnessed a domestic livestock animal that has been taken down by a coyote?
I've witnessed videos of it. My dog actually was attacked by coyotes. I fortunately rescued it. So that's a wild animal, and then we have a lot of wild animals in the state of New Hampshire.
We do. I will tell you, if you ever do witness it, you will never oppose any method for taking a coyote.
I think that's that was actually the opinion back in the 1980s, where we wiped down all the wolves in New Hampshire, all the catamounts or mountain lions, and I disagree with that entirely.
Thank you for your testimony.
Yep.
No further questions? David Blaze.
Morning.
Welcome, David.
I'm David Blaze. I'm a wildlife control operator, and I'm a hound runner. I oppose this bill. Most of the landowners, agricultural owners, want us running hounds for coyotes on their property. They invite us. They enjoy us being there. And we've developed relationships with these landowners over the last 2 or 3 decades, probably more. Where this occurs, where this coyote hunting with hounds occurs, is agricultural land where landowners have conflict with the animal. We have coyotes stealing pigs, turkey, chicken, domestic animals. You know, those lost dog posters, we all know what those really mean. The dog's been snatched up by a coyote. So coming from a wildlife control operator background, working in wildlife and pest control and hunting coyotes most of my life, I understand the need for using dogs to hunt these coyotes. All these other methods of year-round hunting are pretty futile. I've gone 30 to 60 days trying to call in or shoot a coyote and never seen one. A lot of these people have never seen a coyote in their life, and there's a reason why. Those dogs are a tool that are used and well taken care of. Talking about a coyote can't be treed, I mean, what do you mean by treed? Can I ask you that?
Good. Just continue with your testimony.
Having no experience and never actually witnessing this type of hunting, you can't really develop an opinion on what happens, what really occurs in these places with these hounds while we hunt. And to just say it's some gruesome dogfight isn't true. The guys out there, like myself, with boots on the ground, experiencing this hunting, we're not seeing dogfighting. The dogs aren't harmed. Where do you get your information?
My question from the chair, basically, how difficult is it to hunt without a dog?
Most coyote hunters don't have success in an entire season. Some that are really, really good at it can call them in and shoot them, but these are crepuscular and nocturnal animals. During the day, you're not going to really see a coyote. They're active at night. You have thermal and night vision hunters, not just a handful, a small group, and they might get a few, but the reason this year-round season exists is because of how difficult it really is to shoot a coyote.
How prevalent is it in the state to use dogs?
It's a very small group as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know 5 people in this entire southern part of the state that run hounds for coyotes. It's extremely small.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator Bertzel.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. In your experience, have any domestic dogs that have been used been killed?
No. They've been hit by cars. That's about it.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Pearl?
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. I too am getting over a cold. Thank you for coming in today. So would you, from your testimony, I'm gleaning that really the use of this practice is very targeted and in very necessary situations where it's primarily around livestock.
Yes, the areas that we return to continually are the same places with the same landowners, with the same livestock, and they want us there, and they love us there because we're serving them a purpose in managing coyote populations. We will never wipe them out, but we might reduce the amount of animals that are taken. The communities like us there where we go.
Follow up? Are you feeling that, as a landowner and a former livestock person myself, I've had experience, and there's not with hounding, but in trying to manage the coyote population around your livestock is a challenge. Are you feeling that just the presence of the dogs being in the area, the canine, tends to push those coyotes away from the livestock because of the scents and the smells that are there? Do you notice that at all?
It can't be said because the coyote population is so transient. It's in their scientific names, Canis latrans. You get a revolving door of coyotes coming through constantly.
Well, they're opportunists, certainly. They're going to go for the easy prey.
Yeah, if you have a resident set of coyotes that set up camp there that can frequent that area, it's possible that using hounds might maim them or discourage them from being there just by their presence. Yeah, that's possible.
Final question. Do you feel that if we pass this bill that it would cause a negative effect in the livestock industry because of the fact that your services are not available?
I think so, because there won't be anyone who's available who can actually manage coyotes, you know.
Thank you.
Their name means what?
What's that?
You said that, it's...
Canis latrans is their scientific name. They're transient.
Transient,
Yeah.
thank you.
They're not in packs. They run solo or sometimes double. There's no such thing as a real coyote pack.
I love learning new words. Senator Bertzel, did you have?
You just answered my question.
Senator Waters, a question? All right, Senator Altshuler? Well done. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much for hearing me.
Joan, you wanted a minute. I'll give you 2.
Hello, thanks. My name is Joan O'Brien. I'm from Amherst. Thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to say we're talking about examples. I can think of 2 examples of hounding. In January of 2022, there was a news report about some dogs that got rescued on the ice at the Androgoskin River, and they had been chasing a coyote who I guess fell through the ice and drowned. So that's one example. Second one is a man named Tom, can't remember his last name, but he lives in Keene, and he had come across some people hounding coyotes on his land. He was very unhappy about it, and it was not agricultural land. The gentleman before me mentioned that, you know, he's never seen anybody behave badly, but all it takes is a few bad actors for the damage to be done. So coyote hunting in all the ways that are allowed is not done to acquire food or fur, because it's done because this animal is perceived as causing only problems and providing no benefits. And as a result of this belief, our rules for hunting coyotes are more lenient than for any other hunted animal in the state. And I believe that the lack of limits and the anything goes attitude leads to joy killing. And I think it's a bad example for children to see that, to be shown to them that an animal doesn't matter and they're just there to be killed. And coyote hounders will say they love their dogs. I did mention that the dogs went out onto unstable ice, so they were at risk there, and they do get hit by cars because they run into traffic. I guess it's not unusual for the hounders to lose radio control with the dogs. Coyotes are not useless. They're a valuable predator in our woods and fields. If you eat animals, whether you eat cows or deer, you're going to see the coyotes as your adversary, and that's just something to keep in mind. And also, if you are killing coyotes and you're killing off the alpha males and females, you're going to end up with breeding lower down in the tree, and you're going to end up with juveniles who haven't been taught by an adult how to hunt, and they're going to be more problematic than ones that are in a stable coyote pack. And I probably went over a minute. I'll just wrap up by saying that the Department of Fish and Game sanctions coyote hounding. As a New Hampshire citizen, this causes me great distress. It has negatively impacted the quality of my life because I sit around and I think about these animals and the ways that they're being killed out in the woods. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for these illustrations. Very
Yes,
well done.
I decided to give you some visuals.
Questions from the committee? Thank you. Seeing none. Let's see, I can't read your writing, but I think the last name is Pad or Pod, Rad. What do you got? Ray Van?
Vanderwood, Vanderpod?
Randapod? Wishing to, starts with an R. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, right, that works. You're not a doctor, are you?
He's a frequent flyer here.
You are a doctor? I'm dyslexic on top of that, so this isn't easy.
I'm dyslexic as well.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Avard. Thank you for hearing my testimony, members of the committee. Here, let me pass along. A lot of great points made today about this bill, which I support, and I thank Senator Waters and the other sponsors for putting this forth. There are a lot of facts and Rick Vanderpool, Sandwich, New Hampshire. There are a lot of facts and, as well as you all know, a lot of misinformation about coyotes, their populations, their management. It's been already stated, the obvious, that coyotes have a 365, 24/7 hunting opportunity available to the citizens of the state who hold licenses. But what isn't as readily apparent is how we got here in terms of allowing hounding of the eastern coyote. And I want to point out one part of my written testimony before you that recognizes the origins of the North American model of wildlife conservation that started in the late 1800s, wherein George Bird Grinnell and Teddy Roosevelt got together and started, as you all know, the Boone and Crockett Club. And from that beginning, in that period of wildlife conservation, ethical sort of treatment of our public resource, our public wildlife, there was a sort of definition posited in Field and Stream about what constitutes a sportsman. And those bullets are as follows. A sportsman while hunting, does so primarily for the pursuit or chase. It didn't say for the chase or pursuit by animals. It affords game a sporting chance for chase. How sporting is having a pack of dogs chase down a sole coyote. Dogs that are well-fed, trained, and have usually GPS collars that work on them. A hunter while hunting seeks the knowledge of nature and habitats of the animals. What knowledge is necessary if the dogs are doing the work and chasing down the animal? While hunting, the sportsman derives no financial profit from the game killed. That's probably true since most coyotes that are killed are not processed, not eaten. Sometimes the pelts are taken, and as you know, pelt prices are variable, but typically 25 to 50 bucks, maybe 100 tops. How does that pay for certainly the dog care that's required to support this? while hunting, the sportsman will inflict no unnecessary pain or suffering on game. And I highly doubt that that could possibly be true while hounding coyotes. Again, as Senator Waters said, not just for the coyote itself, but for the dogs themselves. And then finally, the sportsman while hunting will not waste any game that is killed. And here, I believe, is a statement of fact that the animal is not used. It's not like a deer where the meat is processed and eaten. It is, again, occasionally used for the hide, but as our wildlife control officer before me testified, it's primarily to eliminate the animal. I would point out as well that there's a very small percentage, as was stated, of people who actually do this in the state. So my opinion is simply that there would be very few people impacted by this. Secondly, as Ms. O'Brien pointed out, hunting coyotes and eliminating an alpha male or female will actually increase the population. I believe other members of the New Hampshire Wildlife Coalition have testified before the Senate body that, in fact, coyote populations will respond to those types of depredation by overproducing and over-reproducing. And I believe our wildlife control officer pointed out that he goes back to the same places. Why is that? Because the populations are sustained. In other words, they're not eliminated. So this is a perennial problem. And in fact, if you allow coyotes to train their offspring for the proper behaviors of avoiding and using the proper control opportunities, like some people who use llamas and electric fencing, other ways of protecting livestock, that is a much more secure and sustainable practice of avoidance of those depredation events. So in conclusion, I just want to say that I think this is a sound bill. It's time to sort of move us into the 21st century and uphold some of the tenets of legitimate purposes that were cited in the North American model of wildlife conservation that Fish and Game supports. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none? Well done. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have Katie Nolan. You have the floor.
All right. Hello, back again, Katie Nolan, a wild animals campaign specialist in defensive animals and Sullivan County resident. I'm here speaking in support of Senate Bill 346 to prohibit coyote hounding with dogs. Hunting coyotes with hounds has far-reaching negative impacts that extend beyond the welfare of coyotes to the welfare of hunting dogs, the greater ecosystem as a whole, the safety of communities in New Hampshire, and citizens with vested property rights. The lack of effective control of hounds during these pursuits can result in trespassing and property damage, as dogs cannot read posted signs. This raises significant concerns for landowners who do not want the disruption of hounds running through their property. There are known instances of frenzied hounds startling livestock, attacking domestic animals, and destroying property. GPS collars allow hunters to be miles away from their dogs, and in my opinion, if a dog is out of sight of the hunter, then how can they be controlled? Coyote hounding also places stress on non-target species like deer, moose, small mammals, and ground nesting birds. Their reaction is to flee when hounds pass, causing them to expend energy. And hounding also occurs when many of these species are caring for offspring as well. You already heard about how the practice of coyote hounding is inconsistent with the principles of fair chase. I also believe that. And to conclude, a ban on coyote hounding would protect landowners, wildlife, and the ecosystem as a greater whole. And I respectfully ask that you consider voting in favor of this bill to prohibit coyote hounding. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Well done. Good job. Elizabeth Marino? Okay. You're speaking for Elizabeth?
Yes.
And you are?
Linda.
You're Linda?
And I you can see my name there, as supporting the bill,
Oh, I see it, okay.
and you can see how I crossed it out,
I
changed
see
my
that
mind
with the-
quite a bit.
That's all right.
So anyway, yes, Linda Dion, and I serve on the nonprofit Voices of Wildlife in New Hampshire. I serve on the board, and I'm representing the Voices of Wildlife right now. And I'll give you these. Senator Abbott,
Yes.
I have a thing for you, a comment. I think you just called coyotes cruel when you said how they killed your dog. Well,
It was
that,
not my dog, it was my neighbor's.
oh, your neighbor's
yeah,
dog.
yeah.
I think you said, you kind of muffled your voice, but you said they were cruel. That is anthropomorphization, giving human characteristics to animals. We're accused of that all the time. You know, we're accused of being emotional, and we have a Bambi mentality and all that kind of crap.
And we're not
But-
animals.
We are. We
Oh.
are human animals,
Oh, I see.
and we are cruel. Coyotes are not cruel. Non-human animals are not cruel. They are doing what they do to survive. It's instinctual to survive. They don't do it out of cruelty. Only humans do things out of cruelty. Okay, if you can cite a case where an animal's being cruel, you know, a lot of people say the cat, when he's teasing the little mouse, is being cruel. But again, that's instinctual. It's not cruelty. So anyway, coyote hounding, hounders are especially cruel because the coyote cannot escape by climbing a tree. Simple as that. So once the coyote is exhausted, he has to turn and fight. Hounders will say their dogs are trained not to fight. The coyote is not trained not to fight. He's going to fight for his life. And I hope the dogs will act in self-defense when the coyote does fight. And that will cause a dog fight. And the coyote is outnumbered, totally exhausted. These are well-trained dogs. The coyote doesn't stand a chance. He is walled. This is wanton waste because the coyote is not eating, and the fur is no good once the dogs get done with the coyote. So it's wanton waste of a natural resource, and Fish and Game is opposed to wanton waste of a natural resource. Okay, we've been attending Fish and Game commission meetings monthly, and we petitioned Fish and Game to end coyote hounding. We tried working with them. They won't work with us. They only work with hunters and trappers, the people who buy licenses. Even though I do buy a hike safe card, I support search
And
and
we
rescue.
appreciate that.
Yes, support search and rescue, and it's doing really great.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, so anyway, sometimes the legislature has to step in. And we're asking you to step in now and do something that Fish and Game should do. And that is to end coyote hounding. And I think that's about it. Okay.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Yeah.
Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have two final speakers. Kyle Baker with the New Hampshire Wildlife Federation. You wish to speak? This your first time here?
Welcome. Good to see you.
I could read his writing.
So, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kyle Baker. I'm here on behalf of the New Hampshire Wildlife Federation. The New Hampshire Wildlife Federation is an association made up of New Hampshire's fish and game clubs, folks that are out there on the ground supporting and advocating for the ability to hunt, fish, trap, as well as the ability to access land for hunting, fishing, and trapping. We're here to respectfully raise our concerns in opposition with this piece of legislation. Mainly, our main opposition to the bill is, in one of our bylaws, is the style, type of take, the season setting. We believe all belongs to the biologists at the Fish and Game Department. It allows them to make quick decisions, to make changes when they see trends, troubling trends, improving trends, allows for flexibility for all. Use of hounds for hunting is one of the longest forms of hunting. It's been around globally for as long as folks have been hunting, using domesticated canines to do that. As the years continue on, the technology obviously does get better. The use of GPS collars is an important part of the support, giving the owners of the dogs very specially bred, highly trained dogs. They love to work and they love to hunt. Use of GPS collars doesn't necessarily mean that the hunter can just sit in their truck and watch it all play out on the screen. What it does do is it gives the hunter additional information. Ability to see if the dogs are entering property that's known to be problematic. Obviously, dogs don't see property lines, and if you've spent enough time out in the woods, sometimes it's hard enough for us to know when we're moving from one parcel into another parcel. The ability to use the technology allows to reduce those conflicts with landowners that don't appreciate the use of hounds on their property. Something that we've knocked around that might be a more appropriate first step would be the use of data. The collecting of data on the style of take of coyotes, whether or not what seasons they're being taken in, what months they're being taken in. I think everybody would be surprised to see and be better off seeing when coyotes are being taken. For instance, for example, Colorado has a survey. When you get your hunting license and you're interested in coyote hunting, there's a survey for coyotes. How many did you take this last season? Where'd you take them? When did you take them? And what style did you take them in? What type of hunting did you use? No system is perfect, obviously, but our organization is committed to helping with those conversations to see before we were to move towards an outright prohibition on the tradition, to see if there's a better option for collecting of data in the future. So with that, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? So, Chair has a question. As far as rulemaking, are you working with the department as far as?
We have not yet. The department is just starting to enter into their rulemaking process for the next seasons. I'm sure they're obviously here. I don't want to speak for them, but we're happy to engage in those conversations as the process kicks off.
Right, as far as data, as far as how many are being taken and things of that nature.
Yeah.
They're our final speaker, so
Sure.
I'll ask them about that as well. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our final speaker is the department, if you would mind coming up. Dan Bergeron.
Good morning again. Thank you for allowing me to talk. I'm Dan Bergeron, Chief of the Wildlife Division for New Hampshire Fish and Game. I'm here today to testify in opposition of SB 346. So issues surrounding management of fur-bearing species, particularly coyote, are typically hotly debated. We see these things come up periodically, and the department tries to manage. We're in a difficult situation of trying to manage multiple perspectives. And when it comes to management of fur bears, we tend to see very polar opposite requests for how those species are managed. So it can be very difficult. This was, this is no different. Recently, in our last biennial rulemaking process, we had no proposals to change rules for coyotes, but we received a fair amount of comments on management of coyotes, to the point where there was quite a bit of discussion at the final commission meeting on the subject. Our commission had asked that biological staff at a future meeting put together a presentation on coyote management in the region and in the state, and consider ways to collect more information to better inform management decisions on coyotes moving forward. So we did that. Staff had put together a presentation, talked about coyote biology, current management practices, what types of impacts we think coyotes may or may not have in the state. And in the end, what we had come up with, what biological staff had come up with and the department is going to be moving forward on, is a registration process for all fur-bearing species, but to include coyotes. These questions continue to come up, and to be perfectly honest, we have a lack of information on some of these species. That tends to be the case with species that have lower harvest pressure. Again, a lot of our data is collected on the species where we have the highest hunting pressure and the most potential for impacts. So one of the things that we're looking to do is have a mandatory registration system that would allow us to figure out when people are harvesting these, how many they're taking, what methods they're using, to get a better impact of get a better idea of what impacts of restricting some of these things might be. Currently, the department uses capture and effort data from a mandatory trappers report that the data is provided by licensed trappers in the state, and that gives us capture per unit effort, which has been historically has been our most effective and efficient index to track changes in populations of coyotes and all fur bear species. Data from that suggests that our coyote population has largely been stable over the last 30 or so years. Obviously, locally, you can see, deviations from that, and on an annual basis, you see a lot of variation because, again, wildlife species are impacted by a number of things aside from just hunting pressure, food availability, weather patterns, things like that. So that has been the index that we've used, and again, based on that information, it seems evident that our current hunting season structures, trapping seasons, are not having a negative impact on the coyote population at large. It's been very stable. Coyotes are a generalist species. They're highly productive. So again, their population seems to be doing well in the state of New Hampshire. Does not appear to be any risk, to the population as a whole from current seasons. Another thing that the department started back in 2021 is we reached out to the University of New Hampshire, and we had started some research with them, again, to get more information on fur-bearing species, to include coyotes. And we started a research project to look at camera traps, remote data from remote cameras, to serve as another index to track changes in these populations, just to have a better feel for what these populations are doing, and if adjustments are needed to inform those decisions. That work is set to wrap up, I believe, by the end of 2025. So again, we're looking to get more data to inform these decisions. Again, as I testified on the previous bill with squirrels, the department does like to retain the authority to make these adjustments in rule. With certain hunting methods, hound hunting in particular, they tend to be controversial. Although I will say that these do tend to be widely accepted for wildlife management agencies across the country. All of the surrounding states, Mass, Vermont, and Maine, all do still allow some form or another of using dogs to hunt coyotes. And they can be an important tool in the toolbox for species that have lower harvest pressure. Again, we have no issues meeting our management objectives for things like deer, where we have 55,000 hunters in the state to pursue that animal. Other species, bears another example, there's other practices we allow for certain species when hunting pressure, we have concerns about whether or not hunting pressure is enough. So again, given the stable trend in the population, the fact that we are looking to gather more information to better inform some of these decisions, we would ask that this committee vote to oppose this bill. Happy to answer any questions.
Senator Waters with a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks for being here and for
Absolutely.
your informative testimony. Wouldn't it be fair to say that our surrounding states, in fact, do have regulations, such as Maine limits the number of dogs to be used, and Vermont has a pretty extensive registration and permitting system, right? And Massachusetts as well has certain limits on the season and so on and so forth, so that certainly there is a context around us for recognizing that there needs to be regulation.
Yes, absolutely. So the regulation does vary from state to state. Vermont actually just very recently put in a number of changes to their allowance of hunting coyotes with hounds. I'm not offhand, I'm not familiar with all of them, but there are things in terms of timing and number of animals used. So yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure that the statement here needed the context of accuracy.
Yeah, and that actually.
If I could follow up with another question.
Yeah, may I just, one more point? That is some of the information that we're looking to gather from this registration process to inform potential changes like that.
Thank you. Yeah, and so, you know, I probably don't have completely in my memory every rule of Fish and Game or statute, but your regulation at Fish and Game is focused on the game species. Is that correct?
Yeah, so game species, fur-bearing species, game birds, yep.
Okay. So in terms of potential animal cruelty, that is not under your purview as a department. In
No.
terms of dogs, that's under other statute, right?
I believe that's accurate, yes.
So you can understand the concern that we have to weigh hunting and hunting rights and tradition. I mean, we don't do fox hunting anymore, you know, okay, with dogs and horses, but you can understand that from the lens through which you look is not the lens through which legislators have to look, because we have to look also at animal cruelty related to dogs. Is that fair enough about your
Yes,
restrictions of your
absolutely.
approach?
And I think that's a fair statement of all of our constituency. I think everyone comes at these things with a different lens, and I think that's why we receive, again, such drastically different requests on how we manage certain species. You know, I hear it a lot, and you know, statements that the department only listens to sportsmen. I do take issue with statements like that, and you know, I think we could fill rooms with sportsmen that say we do not always listen to their requests either. You know, we're in the unique, maybe not a unique position for state government, but trying to manage for a very diverse constituent group and a public resource at that. So there are varying views on how these things should be handled. We try and do our best, and you know, again, I think collecting more data is a step in that direction for the department.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Pearl with a question.
Thank you, Dan, for coming in today. So we heard testimony earlier from a gentleman who does hounding. From the department's perspective, do you see coyote hounding as a sport hunt opportunity in New Hampshire, or do you see it more as a tool, a practice that's used to kind of lower populations in sensitive areas?
I think it's probably a combination of the two. You know, it's tough to speak at what kind of drives individuals to pursue game. You know, and that's true for all species. You know, that's true for deer, down onto gray squirrels. You know, what I can say, again, and I think this is true for any group of people, whether they're hunters or, you know, any sort of sport or pastime or whatever people do. But what I can speak to is that, you know, the department, you know, hunters are required to take hunter education. And one of the things that is, and I remember this from when I went through, you know, we really hammer in respect and care for the animal. Again, everyone is an individual, have different motivations, but from the department's perspective, we really try and hammer in, you know, care for the animal, respect for the animal. There's a lot of talk, and again, you know, I think from my previous testimony, you know, I don't like referring to animals as nuisance. I think all animals have, you know, a role to fill, a purpose. They're all important. They all should be respected. But again, there's varying management techniques for different species, depending on a number of factors, from, you know, productivity, other natural factors that impact the population, hunting effort, things like that. So, you know, it's a tough question to answer.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for trying.
Senator Perso with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so from what I'm hearing, Our surrounding states, Maine and Vermont, they have not prohibited the hounding, but they've actually they're trying to manage it and limit the hound hunting. Is that correct?
Vermont is probably the most recent example of that, where they've recently, within the past few months, had put some new restrictions in place that does further restrict hunting with hounds. Absolutely.
Not a total ban.
Yeah, not a ban. There's no state around. All three states allow it in some fashion or other. I can't speak offhand of what their specific regulations are, but Vermont is probably the best example of state with that recently passed certain restrictions. There's a season length now. I believe there's a restriction on the number of dogs that can be used, things like that.
So if we pass this, sorry, follow up. If we pass this, we'd be the only state in our area to prohibit.
Certainly, yeah, between New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont, and Massachusetts, yeah, all other states do currently allow some form or another of using dogs to pursue coyotes. Yeah.
Any further questions? Seeing none, the hearing is now closed.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right. You are next. Missing deer system with a confirmation also, blah, blah, blah. Give you this, Bill. Senator Waters, you are now recognized. SB 544.
Well, I'm not Senator Waters.
Senator Earl. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
One statement. If somebody's going to testify, this is an official document. Please sign up on it, and if you don't say that you want to speak, or you're not going to speak. Okay? Just please put your name on it, and that way we can know and plan. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Howard Pearl, representing District 17. I am here today to introduce Senate Bill 544, replacing the deer seal system with a confirmation number system. Good morning, Energy Committee members. I'm introducing Senate Bill 544 at the request of Fish and Game as a housekeeping measure. Previously, a hunter had to transport their deer to a brick and mortar station to register the harvest and receive a deer seal, the metal tags, for those of you who aren't familiar, to attach to the deer as a proof of registration. In 22, House Bill 1230 was passed, requiring Fish and Game to establish an online system for a hunter to register their deer. This new system issues the hunter a confirmation number electronically, as the registration is taking place online and removing the need for a physical deer seal. Senate Bill 544 updates the references to deer seal in several statutes to replace it with confirmation number. In addition, the bill adds language to indicate that a list of registration stations are included in the annual Hunting and Trapping Digest. Dan Bergeron is here from Fish and Game to answer any other questions you have on the technical portions of the bill. So I thank you for considering this bill, and I hope we can pass it.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. Dan, you're our only speaker, so you have the floor if you'd like to speak. And it's a good bipartisan bill, it seems.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I'm really here for questions. Senator Pearl did a good job. This is really just housekeeping to change a reference to a term that we really don't use anymore now that we're doing things electronically. We don't have that physical metal seal anymore. So it's really just cleaning up the language to match what we're doing.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, Dan Bergeron. I'm the Chief of the Wildlife Division for New Hampshire Fish and Game.
All right. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And is there a motion to move it? Any?
We're behind schedule, I think.
Oh, we are? I mean, we're going to knock this one right out. Okay.
4587?
We can do whatever you want, but.
It's up to you folks if you want to just quickly knock one off. But all right, let's close the hearing on this one and open up SB 587. And we'll hear from the prime sponsor. Please introduce yourself.
I am not Senator Waters. I am Senator Pearl from District 17. Oh, I don't think you were in here when he introduced the last. Well, good morning. For the record, I am Senator Howard Pearl from District 17. I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 587. This bill was brought to me and was asked by the members of the shelter community to come in and bring this in for you to deal with a small situation that they are experiencing when animals are coming in dealing with our quarantine regulations. Essentially what they're asking for is that animals that are litter mates, when they come into the state, that they can be kept in the same quarantine container, or pen, or crate, whatever you want to call it, so that as they've traveled together and they come to the state, they're technically supposed to be separated right now, and this would allow them to stay together. But what this bill does is it allows for exceptions to be made to that rule by the Department of Agriculture, or the Commissioner. I know we're going to hear testimony today, pros and cons on this, and that I believe there may be a need for as a little bit of an amendment to perhaps put some guardrails on what those exceptions can exactly be, because if you read the way I've introduced it, it really opens it wide up. So we're going to take testimony today, and I think the committee may want to, I may come in with an amendment later on to look at exactly what that should look like. But I think we've got a good bill here, and I hope the committee will consider supporting it. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. And our only speaker is Heather, if you'd like to come up. And she's pro. She just broke something. Heather, I guess she's pretty excited about this bill. Okay.
It's the squirrels.
It's the squirrels.
Oh, my goodness.
All right, as your heart starts to stop
I
racing.
know. It didn't help my fear of public speaking at all.
That should cure you of it. So welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Feria. Thank you. So, good morning. Well, I could think it's still morning at this point. My name is Heather Feria. I've been the executive director of the Pope Memorial SPCA for 12 years. I also serve as a representative on the Governor's Commission for the Humane Treatment of Animals, and today I'm representing the New Hampshire Federation of Humane Organizations. Just quickly, the Federation is about 20 members of New Hampshire's oldest and largest animal shelters. It's comprised of both brick and mortar animal shelters as well as some rescue groups in New Hampshire, and we are all licensed by the Department of Agriculture. In order to operate in New Hampshire, we must comply with the legal requirements for record keeping and health management that you're probably all familiar with in RSA 437. And we must also manage the much more specific standards found in Ag Rule 1700. And those range from animal husbandry to facility requirements to written programs for veterinary care and what even must be included in our contracts and forms. We are subject to inspection annually as well as surprise inspections at any time. As Senator Pearl already introduced, the bill is a result of conversations we've been having with the Department of Ag for quite some time to try and find a way to allow litter mates who travel together remain in quarantine together for that period of time. Based on the current legal interpretation of the statute, we have been told that the department feels like it does not have the rulemaking authority to create that allowance. And this bill would explicitly give the department that rulemaking authority. With regards to the actual concept of quarantining litter mates together, there's a lot of precedent in New Hampshire with regard to other groups of animals that are transferred together. So the flocks of chicks that go to the feed stores, livestock, etc., they are all experience quarantine in groups, so there's nothing extraordinary about that concept. The department, as part of the rulemaking process, would likely create very specific criteria on how this could be done in order to safeguard animal health. And our understanding that they have no objection to this general concept, or is there any concern for significant impact to public health or safety? From our perspective, by keeping litter mates together, it would greatly reduce anxiety and trauma for those animals during the quarantine period, And we know that reducing stress and anxiety also has the added benefit of helping animals resist disease and sickness. If this bill is passed as written, then we would have to go through the process of rules being drafted and passed to provide that additional detail of how the quarantine would be managed by the licensees. So we ask that you consider passing this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and on your way, we hope you don't break anything.
As do I.
So I think Senator Pearl had mentioned something about an amendment to tighten up the language a little bit. Are you going to be able to work with him on that?
We're happy to work with anyone on a solution to this. We understand, from the outside, it looks like, and again, we'll do whatever needs to be done in the RSA for those who have seen the difference, the language that exists in the RSA. When you look at the ag rules, they tend to be very, very specific.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that it's addressed in RSA or whether it's addressed in rules, what we're trying to accomplish is pretty simple. So we're open to whatever solution.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Pretty.
I will carefully
All
return
right.
to my seat.
Thank
Thank you.
Just take a different route.
Do you need a copy of my testimony?
We'd like that if you
Okay,
have it.
perfect.
We'll take care of that. And I have nobody else to speak on this, so we will close the hearing on this. 587. Seconded by Senator Altschuler. All in favor of exec? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. And you're going to tighten up the language on this one, right? What was your last bill? What number was that? That was 544.
Can I move on to pass?
You can move on to pass.
Second?
Discussion, 544. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of 544? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, is there a motion for
Consent?
consent?
I'll take it out.
And all in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none?
So, Senator Pearl.
Yeah.
What needs to be done in 587?
I'm sorry, say again.
What needs to be done in 587?
So, sorry, I just put
Do you want to do a committee amendment to it? Or do you-
I don't quite have the language figured out in my head yet, what I want
But
to do. So
I guess what I'm just,
What situations would require?
I mean, but, you see, that's why we have rulemaking.
Right.
You know, and I just, to me, I don't understand why the agriculture department can't, with what we're giving them, make their rules. They'll have a public process that'll go through rules, and this is quite clear that, yeah, make your rules. So I don't know,
So I guess what I am looking at, if you read Section 5, exceptions to the quarantine requirements for individual animals that have entered the state and are intended for transfer, that may allow them to share primary enclosures. It's wide open. They could, we have a good Department of Ag, but when you always, as legislators, we always look at the worst-case scenario on some of these things and the power that we're giving. This is wide-open power that would allow anything. I just think we should narrow the parameters just a little, put some guardrails
no,
on it.
I understand, Sam, but, that's why we have the rules process.
Yeah, oh, I get that
You
too.
know.
I understand that too, but the rules process really is just about, does it meet the will of the legislature? And right now, the will of the legislature is very wide open. I just think it's responsible legislating it, if we just put some guardrails on it. And
I'm just curious because,
Sure.
On the other hand, I think that this comes out of a specific situation, but there also may be other circumstances where they're going to need to have this broad enough forum.
They may.
With vector-borne diseases and other things like that.
Yes.
Or, whatever. But, I mean, you'll figure something out. But
Yeah, I don't have the exact language in my head
Yeah.
yet. I know I'm trying to look at and listen to the concerns that we
Yeah,
receive,
good.
mostly by email, and just
Yeah.
make sure that
Sounds
when we're granting that rulemaking authority, we're doing so in a responsible manner. That's what I was looking for.
Thank
All
you.
right, so
Thanks,
maybe
Rick.
next week you'll have
I will.
Okay.
I absolutely will. I
So
apologize. I've been
that's all
snow
right.
plowing for 2 days, and it kind of screwed up my legislating time.
All right, so next week we'll exec a couple more then.
Okay.
So with that, is there a motion to
Okay.
move out of exec?
So moved.
Any opposed? Seeing none, and we'll close hearing. Yes, I can see you want to go. We're all done. Okay.